Yeah, the motivation factor is funny. I think too, when you work with clients, like I almost feel like an element, not guilty, but it's like, it's hard to be always like G'ing up everyone else and then kind of like having that energy to still, go and do it on your own too. And I do believe that like, when motivation lacks, that there's an element of like discipline and routine that takes over. So, but yeah, I'm just trying to have no expectations of just like anything that's like kind of a workout right now is like, that's a huge win. You know?
Oh, yeah, I'm the same. Well, my workout is kind of going up the stairs from the kitchen to my bedroom and then back down again, which is really depressing, but that's about it. That's about all I'm doing.
Have to have 30 meals a day so that you get those steps in up and down the stairs, right?
Awesome, great.
Yeah. I mean, luckily we've got the dog, so like there's an excuse to kind of get out there, and we've got a few sort of friends of ours that live within the 10K radius. So trying to do more like meet them down at the park and stuff like we did last lockdown. But then it's like, it's cold and it's wet. There's so many excuses everywhere at the moment in the middle of winter. But
yeah, well, winter just makes it even harder to get outside, So yeah, that's all right. We'll make it work. We'll get through it. It's going to be tough, but we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, that's it. I think it's kind of one of those things too. Like this time last year, it was like, I'll never take another workout at the gym for granted, like ever again. But how quickly do you just like take it for granted,
Oh, it's so true. After like 3 months, so you're starting to get a bit sore, or like you've been training consistently. It's like, I'll just sleep in a little bit. I'll just take this day off. And then before you know it, one day becomes two, and then you're taking more days off as the weeks go by. And like, yeah, you just forget so quickly. And then we're pushed into this lockdown, and yeah, now I'm like, wow, I actually really miss the gym again. I really want to get back. I really want to see other people. And yeah, it's definitely a reminder, but we have to figure out ways to keep reminding them this to ourselves without a lockdown. Because, why do we need a lockdown to remind us that we like the gym and we like seeing people? I don't know.
I guess you can say that about anything, right? Like gratitude practice, essentially, like that's the whole point, is you kind of get, I lost you. Are you there? Oh, you there?
Sorry, I lost you there.
Yeah, like that, like you're kind of what you have eventually just becomes like the norm, right? And you forget that like where you are and what you have is actually pretty significant. It's not until something's like taken away that you kind of start to realize that, unfortunately. But part of the human condition. Mate, I'm pumped to talk to you. I was joking with Kat that usually the podcast is a really good way for me to talk to people who are
I just missed half of what you said because my internet connection said it's unstable. So if we drop out, I'm really sorry.
That's all right. I'm recording on my phone as well, but I think it's everyone back working from home. I don't know how we haven't figured out the internet situation after the last year, but anyway.
I reckon it's the rain. I think the rain. If it gets wet, I think that's why.
The storm clouds, the thick cover, right?
Yeah.
Mate, I'm really excited to sit down and have a chat to you. I was joking with Kat that usually the podcast is a really good way for me to reach out to people that are quite different. But when I was kind of like putting some notes together for our chat today, I was like, you kind of in business with your partner, gym related business. You guys have like a podcast as well. Like you swap, osteopathy for nutrition, and it's basically kind of one and the same. Right? So I was joking with Kat that this might go one of two ways. It'll be either a really good conversation or just have like nothing to talk about. But yeah, take us, let's start at the beginning, like Akati Fitness, the White Hat podcast. How did you, or even before then, how did you decide osteo was the direction that you wanted to go? Were you always pretty like into movement and exercise, and it was a natural progression, or is it something you fell into? Or
yeah, I think it was a natural progression for me to get into osteo. Oh, don't mind my little cat here just coming to say hello. He'll probably jump in and out of the screen quite a bit. So it was pretty natural for me to get into osteo. When I was growing up as a kid, I was really into movement, and I was doing taekwondo for 10 years. So I competed at a fairly high level with taekwondo, and I was always exercising. Did, team sports like basketball and that as well throughout, like when I was growing up. Yeah. And then as I sort of got a little bit older, or when I finished school, I really wanted to get into physio initially. And unfortunately, the year that I wanted to get into physio, the ATAR went up quite a significant amount. So I missed out. And I started another uni degree, which was health science. And it just wasn't really my thing. I didn't really see any direction with it. and I was just kind of a bit lost and didn't really know what to do, because I did sort of have my heart set on manual therapy, which was physio initially. And then so I tried to try and figure out what I really wanted to do with my life and what I wanted to, I guess, achieve with my career. So because I knew I liked fitness and I liked exercise, I decided to do a personal training course. So I started working as a personal trainer, and my first job was in a CrossFit gym. So I was teaching CrossFit and Olympic weightlifting to people. And over the years, I sort of realized that I really liked weightlifting and I wanted to compete in weightlifting more. And then I kind of decided after a few years of personal training that I wanted to offer more to people. And I sort of came back to my roots of manual therapy and being able to help people a bit more with injuries. So that's when I looked into, okay, what can I do? Can I do physio? Is that something I actually do want to pursue? Or is it a different allied health field that I want to look into? And so I found osteo, and I realized that was my calling. I really liked the concepts of holistic healthcare. So yeah, I did excuse me, what are you doing? I'm just going to kick my cat out of the room, and then I'll tell you a little bit more. Thank you.
These are the joys of
I presume this is what it's like having a child, but it's obviously an animal. It's worse having a child. Anyways, so I sort of looked into osteo, and I was like, okay, what is osteo, first of all? And is it something I really want to do and I really want to get into? Because I wanted to help people with injuries. I knew that much. I really wanted to get people moving and exercising. I knew that much. I'm like, how can I put the two together? Can I look after people's injuries with movement? Is that something that's possible? So I looked into osteo and holistic healthcare, which I really loved. It sort of embraces all parts of a person's health, including exercise, nutrition, looking after injuries. Manual therapy is a very small part of it. So a lot of osteos do practice with mostly manual therapy, kind of like what physios do or massage therapists do. We can also adjust joints like a chiropractor would. But it depends on the type of osteo. So for me, I like to always prescribe exercise for my patients, and I love it. This is my calling, I think. So I'm really, really happy I fell into it.
So you're doing that full time, and then coaching on the side as well, still, right?
Yeah, not so much coaching now. We sort of do a little bit of online coaching. My role with exercise now is more exercise prescription through my osteo job. So osteo, I'm working probably, I would say, part-time as an osteo, and then I also teach Pilates on the side and do online coaching as well. So I have a few different sort of things that I'm working on.
Yeah, it's funny like the osteo community is kind of like the CrossFit community in that it's quite tight knit. Like so every osteo I meet tends to know like every other osteo that I've like ever met, which is cool, I think, because it makes for a really good referral system, like you said, based on how different osteos treat and practice in different ways.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And I think also there's just a really high level of respect amongst the osteos. And I think that osteos, because there's so much that we can treat and look after and sort of promote, we want to learn from other osteos who have special interests in those areas. For example, I know who to go to if I want to learn about ergonomics. I know who to go to if I want to do more seminars on exercise. I know who to go to, if I want to learn about pediatric osteo. So there's a lot of, there's so much to learn, and I think everyone is willing to learn off each other in the osteo community, which is so great. And they just seem to be a really nice bunch of people. That's what I've found so far.
I think in general that holds true kind of across the board. Like I mean, and maybe that's got to do with doing the podcast too, but I'm yet to find someone that I've reached out to like ask if they'd want to do a recording, and I had some questions a while that just said like, no, there's been a few like that are much harder to kind of like nail down and get times and kind of follow through, but everyone seems pretty willing, I guess, to share. Like if they're, if they've made a career of something, they're obviously quite passionate about like whatever it is. And they seem pretty like happy to kind of share that with other people as well. You know what I mean?
Oh, definitely. But I think also, like the type of person you are, you're going to attract like people. So you're going to reach out to people who you think that are similar to you are going to add value to what you're already promoting. And so they're also going to be like you in that personality too, I think. So, like attracts like in that sense, that if you're looking for those people, you're probably going to find them, because that's the type of person you are anyway, I would say. Well, that's my thought on it.
I'll take that as a compliment. I'm sure that's like
it is a compliment, yeah.
Actually, when I first started it, what I used to do was like anyone that I kind of would have on the podcast, and I guess when you start, like you ask basically like the people that you know personally, right? Like to get some practice in. But I was asking people that I'd had on the podcast if they could refer one or two people on that they thought that I would like chatting to, and I found that was a really good way to kind of build up a little bit of that sort of network as well. So yeah, but I guess you're right. Like if you're talking to your friend, so there's like attracts like, and then they're recommending someone that they get on with quite well, like the assumption would be that you would probably get on with that person too, right? For the most part.
I think so.
So Akadi, was that you or was that even, or what came first, Akadi Fitness or Brandon? Which one came first?
So Brandon came first. Akadi Fitness isn't actually my business. It's my partner's business. So Brandon runs Akadi Fitness, but I'm sort of part of the team. I'm part of the coaching team there. I help him a lot with his social media. We do the podcast together. We do online coaching, and we run seminars together there as well. He's sort of the face of Akadi Fitness, I guess you could say. He does personal training in person when we're allowed to, and also runs group weightlifting sessions and group fitness. So he was first, and we met each other at my CrossFit job. We both were CrossFit coaches, and then we sort of realized we're the same person, just male, female, and we work really well together. So and then he started Akadi Fitness, and he's doing a really great job with it. So I'm really proud of him, and I'm really happy that I can support him with the business and that I get to be a part of it and grow it as well, because it's so much fun, I think, doing something with your partner and learning to work together as well, that you're someone so close with. It's got its challenges, of course, but it's really rewarding, and I just love it. It makes it so much fun.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you feel like you're on like the same page or like heading in the same direction, it makes like a lot of the other, what would normally be like peripheral issues in a relationship, seem like much less significant in many ways. And if you've got the cat, but trust me, once you've had a business together, like having a child is like not too dissimilar, right? Like you kind of, as you kind of grow together, as you see the business grow, it's pretty similar. And then you turn around in 9 months, you're like, how is it 9 months old already? So, yeah. Do you guys, this, not trying to like be overly personal, but do you guys live together?
No, we don't at the moment. No. So he's with his parents. I'm with my parents. But we are looking to live together soon.
I was going to say, how have you found like being locked down for significant amounts of time and working together and everything else? But maybe I'll save that one for this time next year if we're still playing the lockdown game.
Yeah. Good idea.
The podcast, like that's something that you mentioned you've been doing. We're coming up to almost a year now on that.
So we've recorded 44 episodes. So Brent and I started Wired AF podcast it was August last year, actually. So we're pretty close, getting really close to a year. And it was pretty much started because we were in lockdown for the second time last year. And because we'd just come out of lockdown for those couple of weeks, if you remember, and then we were forced back into lockdown again. And we were both working in the fitness industry at the time, because I was teaching just Pilates. I wasn't doing osteo at that time because I was still at uni, and we needed something to do. So we kind of said to each other, we have to work. Like, we've got to do stuff. What are we going to do? We want to create some content for people. We want to promote this message. Let's just do it. So we started it, and I don't think we realized we'd be this far into it. So we've got 43 episodes now, and I love it. It's so much fun. We always get to talk to some really great people. And I've learned so much as well, just from researching topics or from talking to guests. And I think it makes your communication skills a lot better when you do something like that.
Yeah, 100% agree. It's interesting. Almost feel the art, like conversation is like an art that's kind of lost, right? Like I think we're so used to like having peripheral conversations or like short-term conversations that you kind of lose the ability to actually have something that stems over a period of time, where you can not just give a point, but actually explain an idea and kind of build it out in a conversation. And I feel like that somewhat has been lost. Everything's kind of clickbait, everything's soundbite, everything's like your 1 minute Instagram. but yeah, have you noticed, like, if you go back now and you kind of listen to the first 3 episodes, are you like, oh man, like this was so bad to begin? And yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we cringe. We talk about it all the time, and we just sort of say to each other, like, what were we doing when we started? We didn't know what we were doing. Like, you learn so much. I think we just did a really great recording with our most recent guest, and we said to each other after the episode, I'm really glad that we did this episode with her 40 episodes down the track and not for our first one, because our interviewing skills and our communication skills were so much better than what they were at the beginning. Like, we really didn't know what to do. So yeah, I think we've grown a lot in that sense. Yeah, some really cringy episodes at the start.
When we started, I was like, I just have to do 100 episodes. Like, once I've done this 100 times, I'll have like a bit more flow and a bit more, like, it's reps, right? You got to get reps in ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, it's all practice. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys, like, and I've kind of been following what you guys have been doing, especially on the podcast too. And you kind of, I like that your approach is, it was almost a little bit similar. You guys are doing, like, you have guests and then you do like specific topic breakdowns. And then I think my favorite part is, at the moment, you're doing like a bit of book review stuff as well.
Yeah, we are. And it's so funny you say that, because I know that you do book reviews as a part of yours as well, and you're really into reading your books. And I think we probably have a few favorites, but we sort of, again, we were looking for new topics to do, and we wanted to increase our knowledge in areas as well. So our first one we did was a book called Why We Sleep, which was a difficult book to read and get through, but I learned so much about it, and I learned so much about sleep. And that was one of our most popular episodes. I couldn't even believe it. We had so many people listen to that one. And it's our longest episode too. So it's just crazy. People clearly want that kind of content. But then we did Atomic Habits, which was really good. We had the author of a book called Eat Like the Animals most recently on, yep. Which I didn't get to interview him, unfortunately, but Brandon did. And just really great to get some different people on. And it forces us to read, because I really want to make more time to read. And I think a lot of people can probably say that. They have a goal to read more. And yeah, this has forced us to read, which is good.
Yeah. When you say read, do you mean physically read, or are you on the Audible train like I am?
I do a bit of both. So originally I sort of started with Audible because I was sort of listening to books when I was walking, but I'm not really doing much walking at the moment. But I really love the actual physical book. I love the paper. It's really bizarre. I don't know what it is, like holding a book in your hand. To me, it's just really nice. Yeah, and I think I absorb a lot more information when I read it, a hard copy. Yeah. But also I like fiction books as well. So like I prefer reading them in that sense with the fiction books, but definitely the factual ones I'm okay to listen to, I think.
Yeah, I think it does go both ways for sure. Like we started the book club, I guess, for the same purpose. It was like a bit more accountability with the reading. And I think that what I found over the last 3 years was I was almost becoming like competitive with like how many books I could get through, but then kind of got to a point this year where I'm like, am I just reading to finish books, or am I like actually reading to like try to then put in place like what I'm learning and making sure I'm understanding it? And I think that's been the best part of like doing the book club is you have to listen with intent, because we're going to sit down and kind of discuss it for an hour. And I know that Mags is going to ask like, which ideas did you take away and how are you trying to apply them and things like that. So it makes you think a little bit more about the content rather than just being like, yeah, cool, read that one, like on to the next.
Yeah, that's something we're still working on. And I know that I'm still working on like applying those ideas. Because like you said, it's all well and good to just read through a number or try pick a number of books you want to read in a year. But actually, yeah, absorbing that information and applying it. And then for us, I mean, we're kind of educators in a way as well, and sharing our information with other people. We need to have time to do that too. So, yeah, I think that's, yeah.
Once you start reading, you realize like how much there is to read, right? And I guess how little you know about anything, even something you think you're like pretty well informed at, you just like, you don't even know how much you don't know, right? Yeah, I would say over the last 3 years, like in terms of personal development, that's probably the best thing that I've started to do is to read more and start to become more aware of like how ignorant I am.
Yeah. Do you have like a favorite book that's helped you the most over the last few years? It's a big question.
Yeah. I definitely go through phases. I think like I kind of go down rabbit holes, and maybe that's why I do enjoy Audible as well, is because you kind of finish one book and it throws up that like, here's like 3 other titles that you might enjoy. I'd say probably the books that I've read that I try to imply or like the most of into like daily kind of stuff would definitely be like the Brene Brown stuff. I've read most of her work, Atomic Habits too. Um, I think the most useful thing that I've kind of picked up is actually the Joe Rogan podcast. And like, I went through this thing a little while ago where I was like, what actually is intelligence? Like what makes like people intelligent or more intelligent or less intelligent? And I kind of got to the conclusion where, if the difference between like the smartest person in the world or the most intelligent person in the world and myself is simply just like the amount of information they've been exposed to and like being able to retain, that's like a gap that I can start to close with like each book that I read, right? And I think Joe Rogan's kind of the epitome of that. Like, I hate his stand-up. I can't stand his stand-up. And I think the reason is because like I listen to his podcast where he talks to some pretty incredible people, and his capacity and his ability to like hold his own and conduct a conversation and learn from those people. I think his stand-up sells him short. Like it's kind of like, it's cheap. Like I feel like it's cheap humor. It's not actually a reflection of how intelligent he actually is. So like listening to Rogan and some of the guests he has on, a lot of the time I'll be like, oh, I really enjoyed that guest. They're probably on because they've just written a book. What's the book? And then kind of go from there. That's how I kind of came across like David Goggins and like Gardsard and like all those kind of guys. Have you heard of any of them? Goggins you would have heard of. Goggins.
No, I haven't. No. I'm well behind. No, I haven't.
That's definitely one to write down. Like Dave Goggins is just like, just wants to be the hardest man on earth basically. And just like his story from like, you know, like Navy SEAL, like whole life transformation, like Navy SEALs and like Delta Force and like super military. And then is now like an ultra marathon runner as well. Pretty incredible story. And I often find that like reading, like we kind of go back and forth in the different things that we read, and everyone kind of puts up a book and everyone else votes, which is also a really good way to make sure I'm not just reading the same thing all the time. But when we read some leadership stuff, I always find it easier to take in concepts if someone's giving me like their kind of personal story, rather than just saying like, here's a bunch of like principles for like management or leadership or like developing connection. You actually tell me like your life story and how you've implied that. I find that much easier to digest. So I would say that Goggins, his book Can't Hurt Me, is probably one of my most recommended books to clients who are like starting the journey. Because of that, it is quite engaging, and it's a pretty impressive story of like what we're actually capable of when we decide we want to do something, right?
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, when you said the title Can't Hurt Me, I'm like, oh, I have heard that book actually.
Yeah, he's yeah, if you ever start like getting into running, it's a really good one to listen to as well, because when you like, he's like running ultra marathons and you're like, oh, this 5K is killing me. It's like, yeah, I think I can finish. I think I can find it in me to finish.
I don't think I'm ever going to get into running, but if I ever do, I'll know what to do.
Walking, faster walking than maybe Steph. How about you guys? What do you think your most like influential read has been, or what's the thing that you're recommending the most? Or do you have a book that you reread like multiple times a year?
I guess we're quite new to the book train. If we're kind of like, I mean, I've always read books, but mostly fiction books. But for me, the one that I've read and reread a couple of times is Atomic Habits, because every time I read it, I feel like I learn something new and I pick up something new and I get inspired again. And then I read it and I'm like, I forgot about that. That's right. I need to do this again. So I want to read it again. And I only read it like, I don't know, 4 months ago or something. But I typically do reread books, and I reread the ones I really like. That's probably my favorite one that I would recommend, but I'm always looking for recommendations. So if anyone has any and they want to send them my way, I'm all ears and I'm happy to read them.
Atomic Habits is one of those books where it would be easy to highlight the unimportant things rather than the important things, because you just run out of highlights basically when you read it. And that's actually a book that I did buy in the hard copy purely so I could read through it slowly, highlight and annotate. And I think when you do kind of work with people as well, and I'm sure that when you're prescribing exercise and talking about like fixing ailments and stuff like that, It's just as applicable to it as like nutrition and mindset, right? But when you're also trying to develop content all the time, I think in the beginning I thought all our content had to be like brand new and like exclusive. But I think there's a lot to be said for taking something that's like clearly applicable, clearly works, clearly is popular, and making it kind of digestible to like your specific audience a little bit more. And again, kind of like having that kind of exposure to a few different things and taking the best and to dilute it down and present it, I think is actually more useful than like not.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like a lot of people, they're not going to go and read research articles, or they're not going to go and read the book themselves, or they're not going to go and look up something for themselves a lot of the time. Sometimes they will if you get a really motivated person. But we found that a lot of people who listen to our podcast, or even just people who I'm talking to, if I can teach them something they've already heard before, but maybe in a slightly different way, just maybe by the way that I word it or the way that I present something to them, maybe they understand it a little bit better, or maybe they get better results, or maybe they can apply that information a little bit more easily. For example, if I'm trying to give someone an exercise to do at home, and I've discovered that they're a really busy mum, they've got 2 kids and they don't really have a lot of time to put exercise into their schedule. If I can think of a way to get them moving, it might be while they're brushing their teeth, they do their exercises like calf raises, for example. Super simple, maybe boring, but if they're going to do it every time they brush their teeth, all of a sudden they might be doing it twice a day, every day. So it's like about finding ways that you can get people to understand information and apply that information, because motivating people is really difficult. Like we sort of were talking about at the start, we struggle with motivation sometimes, and normal people do too. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I try to be super clear on with clients is like, we're coaches, but we're also human, right? So there's a little bit of like, we get it, like, and we're not perfect all the time either. But yeah, I think that kind of, when you talk about like relatability as well too, and how important that is to building connection and building rapport with other people, whether it be in a CrossFit gym or even on like a treatment bed, right? Like having that rapport and building that kind of sense of trust goes a long way too into actually making sure that there's compliance or there's execution of the plan that you're developing.
Well, that's one of the big reasons why people come back, like if they like you, they're going to come back and see you again, whether it's same with the gym. If they like the gym, they're going to come back and train at that gym. If they like the treatment you provided, you might not have done anything groundbreaking. Like for me as an osteo, I'm sure I'm doing the same as every other osteo in terms of what hands-on therapy I'm applying. And I'm definitely not giving them exercises that are like these crazy different exercises. I'm giving them pretty basic stuff that other people can give them too. But if I can provide that service where they like me and they feel like I'm listening to them and they trust me, they're probably going to come back. So if you can build that rapport with someone, you are going to get them coming back. And I mean, that's what I look for too. If I'm going to find someone, if I want someone to help me with anything, even like a doctor, if I'm going to see a doctor, I'm going to go back to one that I like. I'm not going to keep going back to the same one if I don't like them. Yeah. So it is really important to build that connection.
I definitely find too with like manual therapists and stuff like that, when you walk in, and maybe this is like particularly being a CrossFitter, but when you walk in for treatment and you're like, oh, it hurts when I snatch, and they're like, oh, I'm not really sure what that means. You get that like, or sometimes when you have physios that are just like, oh, just stop training for a little while. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I need some help to work around this or work through it, not to like not do it, So definitely when
and
go on.
I was going to say, yeah, totally. Like you have to, and people will see people that they can relate to in that sense as well. So if I've had so many patients come to me because they do Olympic weightlifting or CrossFit or Taekwondo, because I've done those 3 sports and I understand those sports, and I know because I've done them and competed, and I know what it takes and I know how my body feels. They know that I understand the movements, and so they're more likely to see me again. And I think that I can relate to them really well with that. I love working with weightlifters and I love helping them, get out of those kind of pain movements. And I'm not going to tell them to stop training. I might tell them to modify training, and I'll tell them which things I think will and won't hurt. But it also saves the patient so much time explaining, this is what I'm doing. This is a snatch. And I understand that a snatch is a safe movement if you're doing it correctly with good technique. But maybe someone who doesn't know what a snatch is, they don't understand that. So of course they're going to say, oh, just don't lift for a bit. Don't train for a bit. So if you can understand the movements, then you're going to help your patient, but also I'm going to be attracting those people that are doing those movements. So I think it's really tricky for people if they don't have a background in exercise and they don't have those kind of skills to apply. So for me, I'm really lucky that I have those areas of interest, I guess you could say, because I do see a lot of weightlifters and I do see a lot of CrossFitters. But it's definitely like a bit of a gap in the industry too, where we're not particularly trained a lot in exercise at uni. So there's a lot of holes. Like anything, you know, we can always be better, we can always learn more, but yeah, it'd be good if we learn more at uni, or not just for me, but I think for everyone else as well, so that they know that you don't have to tell someone to stop, you can modify.
I mean, do you like, I mean, sorry, I'm just like stumbling over and trying to think of how I'm going to put the next two sentences together. Before lockdown, you were booked in to do a seminar at Blackburn, which is where obviously how we know each other, where we both train, on bulletproofing shoulders, right? And we were actually in Brisbane at Torium when that was scheduled. So when the first lockdown came, I was like selfishly like a little bit happy that like I didn't miss that, because that's definitely something that I wanted to come down and see. But is shoulder, like, is there a specific injury or like more commonly occurring themes of like issue that you see with CrossFitters or with weightlifters or with both that you tend to be treating more than others?
Yeah, with CrossFitters and weightlifters, I see shoulders mostly. That's like the main complaint they come in for. And they're really tricky too, because it's not that they're weak. It's whereas a lot of people say, oh, this muscle is weak, therefore strengthen this muscle. Or they'll give them a strengthening, like rotate cuff. They say, oh, your rotate cuffs are weak. Just do this little external rotation with your band. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's not going to translate into the sport you're doing, because CrossFit athletes and weightlifters are overhead athletes. So they have their arms up over their head a lot, and they hold a lot of weight overhead too, as well as moving their body weight. So they're actually really, really strong. So then the problem is not that they have a weakness somewhere. It's usually, what I found is that something is not moving as optimally as it should. And usually that's their scapulothoracic joint. So where their shoulder blade sits on their rib cage at their back, their shoulders usually aren't moving in this upward rotation with their scapulars like they should. Or another thing might be that they're overtraining and they're not recovering enough. There's a lot of different, there's a whole rabbit hole I could go down here with like recovery strategies and things that they could do. Even programming, like if they're doing too much volume, which is typically what CrossFitters do, is too much volume of overhead stuff. They press all the time. They do keeping pull-ups all the time. They're doing handstand push-ups. They're doing so much stuff overhead. So often it's too much volume, but as well as that, if they're not recovering, such as sleep, which is really important, nutrition, hydration, and then accessory exercises. So for that, this is what I focus on, is the accessory exercises I can give them to improve their range of motion in that joint. It's usually that their thoracics are a little bit stuck, so their upper back, or their scapula isn't moving correctly. So then their shoulder often feels like it's pinching through the front and it feels stuck. A lot of people sort of explain. Of course, there are circumstances where they might have a strain, like a muscle strain, or like a small muscle tear. Maybe they have like a bursitis, which is an overuse injury through the shoulder. But you can often correct those kinds of things by, number one, offloading the area so you're not overtraining, and finding the training that doesn't hurt and still do that training that doesn't hurt. Number two, recovering properly, like we spoke about. And then number three is optimizing that movement of the shoulder joint. So I'll work with people to try and improve that movement. And often I find that helps. And even educating them as well. Sorry, there's so many things I can say in this. Yeah, but even like educating people as well. So, pain education is a really big part of what I do as an osteo. And it was a really big thing that was pushed to us at uni, because, I'm only fresh out of uni, but this is what the most recent research is saying, is that pain education can really help patient outcomes. So if you teach someone what their pain means, then you're going to help them to improve their pain. So for example, the main thing that I try and help people understand is that just because you feel pain, it doesn't mean that there's damage in the area. Or just because your pain is really high, it doesn't mean that there's a lot of damage in the area. You can often work around the pain you're feeling. and you can find an exercise that you can still do, or you can find things that you can still do to build your confidence and to continue training, because movement at the end of the day is what's going to help most injuries. I've found that's movement, so that's what I try and help to encourage people to do.
I guess the two difficulties really. One, with CrossFit, it's super hard to actually gauge volume week to week, as opposed to like when you're writing a weightlifting program and you're looking at sets and reps and total volume over the course of the week, and how that can be manipulated for like deload weeks and such, right? But I guess the other point too to what you said is like pain is super, super subjective, right? And I think that like I couldn't tell you the last time that I woke up and was like, I feel 100% everywhere. Like nothing hurts. Like there's no like aches, pains, like DOMs, like everything is. But I think, do you think that that's the longer that you're in it, the higher your pain threshold, or the more you just accept that, like, being a bit sore or feeling a bit beat up or having a couple of niggles is kind of just like, it's par for the course when you train at a certain level of intensity, frequency, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, look, that's kind of a double-edged sword, that one. Like, I mean, to some extent, if you're training a lot, you are going to have niggles and you are going to get a bit sore here and there. Like that's to be expected, especially if you're not resting, or if you've got other things going on in your life, such as stress, for example, is a really big thing that will play into someone's pain, or negative attitudes towards their pain, or negative attitudes towards things in their life. It's not like it's just you're in pain and you're training. It can be other external things, other social things that might be happening. You might be struggling really hard, like with financial things going on. Maybe you're not working at the moment, and that can play into someone's pain as well and often make it a little bit worse. So there's actually a lot of reasons why, like you said, it's subjective. So there are a lot of reasons why someone will feel more pain than someone else. But with, you said that you might expect that you'd get better at understanding your body. But I think that people just, what am I trying to say? I'm going on a tangent and I don't know what I'm trying to say.
It's almost the opposite, right? Your baseline of no pain gets higher and higher and higher. So you get to a point where you're like, oh, I'll just keep pushing through it like I always push through it and it'll be fine. Until one day it's not fine.
Yeah. And like to some degree, like you're going to have pain with things, but understanding that you're not damaged is really important. But there's also understanding when to pull back so that you don't do more damage is also important. So listening to your body is very, very difficult to do. And people always say it, listen to your body and you'll be fine, like rest if you need to. But I think that people don't know what the signs are to listen to their body, to slow down so that then I don't get that overuse injury. So if you're starting to get niggles all the time and you're just like, oh, my shoulder, it's just kind of not feeling right, it's just not going away, it's been months, that's probably a sign that you need to slow down. If you're not sleeping well, that's probably a sign. If you're snapping at people in your life that you wouldn't normally snap at, or you're a little bit maybe aggressive, or maybe you're just feeling a little bit teary, or maybe your food choices, you're getting all these cravings for no reason and you're not sure why, these can be signs as to why, that you need to slow down on things, not just training, but just life in general. Maybe there's other things that you need to dial back down on. So managing those injuries in that way is really important too, not just managing training load. It's actually managing like your life load. So
yeah, I like that, your life load, which is not as easy to deload from a lot of the time as like the gym, right? And again, like to add to that, it's almost like, how many people do you know go to the gym as a way of trying to balance out their life load, right? So then all of a sudden, if you're like, oh, we need to dial it back in the gym, that just dials up everything else, Yeah.
Well, like when you're training, it's a form of stress on your body. Like you're stressing your muscles and your joints to get stronger or to get fitter. And you're actually giving it more load than what it would otherwise have. So you are actually making things harder for yourself by going to the gym, but you're also helping yourself. So you got to, it's really important to understand how much load is too much, what you can handle, what's going to fit in with your life, which is probably going to change as well throughout your life. When the exercise I'm doing now is way less than what I was doing when I was 18, but I had no responsibilities when I was 18. So of course I could train like 6 days a week, and I was recovering amazing and sleeping every night, like, my 8 hours. Now, like I'm 30 and I've got to pay bills and I've got to work, and like I can't train the same amount as I used to. I've had to dial it back. 4 days is my sweet spot. I'm okay with 4 days, or no days at the moment in lockdown. That's fine too.
Yeah. I have a client at the moment, and one thing that we've done to try to help manage his like loading is like whenever there's percentage work up on the board, rather than thinking it's like 85% of his best ever 1RM, we say like it's 85% of what you think your 1RM is for the day. So if you're feeling like your legs are tired and you're feeling like things are moving slow at what's normally only 70%, call that your 1RM and do percentage work based off that number. So as to not like, you know, when you don't feel good and you feel tired and you feel beat up and you feel sore, you don't want to be anywhere near like your 1RM back squat, like trying to do reps, like you just ask. Yeah. The non-gym life load, is that something that typically would manifest as what they would call like non-specific lower back pain, or is that like not at all? Like there's like I've heard a bit about like with backs, it's like no one really, like there's treatments, but a lot of the stuff to do with back pain is a lot more mental than it is physical.
There are definitely a lot of mental aspects with lower back pain, especially. I would say that, yes, there are a lot of life things that you can modify to help your non-specific lower back pain. When we're talking about non-specific lower back pain, we're talking that the tests that we would do, like diagnostic tests, don't really show anything specific. They don't really point to a particular area that's injured as such. So, for example, when I'm seeing someone for an assessment with their lower back, I would try and screen them to see, okay, is it a disc issue? Is it a facet issue? Is it a muscle? Maybe it's a ligament. Maybe it's a surrounding joint. Maybe it's one of those things. Maybe it's even like your SIJ, so your sacrum. If I can't really get a clear answer with my testing as to which structure is affected, or maybe it's all of them that are kind of affected in a vague way, or maybe the patient describing it is changing how they describe it each time I see them. So maybe one time it's on their left, one time it's on their right, one time it's a little higher, one time it's a little lower. That would be non-specific low back pain, because you can't really pinpoint which structure is affected. Yeah. And often non-specific low back pain is quite chronic as well. And the issue with chronic pain is that you often have sensitization to an area. So what that means is that because you've had pain in the area before, you're more likely to get pain in that area again. You're more sensitive to pain in that area again. And again, things like your life load. Again, I love this term, life load. I'm going to use it all the time now. Trademark. So this life load that you've got is going to add to your back pain if you've had back pain in the past, especially. But this is where education is really important. Teaching someone that maybe there's not damage, but they need to manage their life load is going to be how you get around it. So again, like we said, sleep, nutrition, exercise, movement. Maybe they do need exercises to kind of balance muscles that aren't quite doing as much as they should. Maybe we need to look at their technique. Maybe we need to look at their movement patterns a little bit. There could be something going on there as to why they keep re-experiencing this pain. But often it is a neural sensitive, like a neural change in the body, in that it's become more sensitive to this painful stimulus, even though there might not be damage in the area. So it might just be a little bit more sensitive, because your nervous system does play quite a big role in the pain that you feel. So if your nervous system's wound up, then you're going to feel more pain. And I think that's a big reason why non-specific low back pain is such a problem. And it does tend to be quite chronic. So there's so many factors that go into it. Well, it's a really big topic.
There's confidence too, right? Like whenever I've kind of come back from a specific back issue or whatever else, and you get deadlifts and you just like get super nervous while you're like loading the bar with deadlifts, and before you even like approach the bar, you're already thinking like, oh fuck, how does my back feel? Like how's my glutes, how's my core? But that like smart programming around like very slow incremental increasing, just to build your confidence back with the movement, even if that movement pattern is okay. Like confidence makes a huge, that must be like a massive part to take into consideration too, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. That's probably the first thing I try and do with people, is build confidence in movement and give them confidence that they can move and they're allowed to move, because they'll avoid movements if they're fearful of them. So if they're scared that something's going to hurt, they're not going to do them. We call them fear avoidance behaviors, and people, they get into the habit of avoiding those movements if they think it's going to hurt. So we have to, just in general, allied health professionals, even PTs and coaches, people who are helping people with movement, we need to help these people build confidence that it's not going to hurt, but also to communicate if it is a bit too much too soon. So it's a bit of a two-way communication from that patient to the person who's helping with them with their movement. For me to build confidence with someone, in movement, usually they're really fearful of leaning forward or like spinal flexion, which is what people often think will give them pain. And that's why they're often scared to do things like deadlifts. So if I can teach them in a really safe way that they're allowed to do that movement, and then along the track, I slowly progress them and teach them, hey, this is the same movement. We're just doing it in a slightly different setup. For example, I might just get them on their hands and knees, rounding their back like they're an angry cat, doing some like yoga style stretches and Pilates style things. And then we might do that in standing. We might do it maybe with a little bit of load later on. So teaching them the movement pattern first in a really safe way is going to help them, and making sure they know that, okay, they're pain-free, and then you start progressing them. It's so important, and it just helps their confidence. And then they're actually going to be able to get back doing what they want to do. So if it is something like deadlifts, we might be doing a modified deadlift, perhaps with less load or less range of motion. So you're not doing it from the floor, you're doing it from like a block or a box up nice and high, because it's a really safe spot to pick something up from. Also, we need to encourage people to do these functional movements, for example, like a deadlift, because it's something we do in everyday life. If you drop something on the floor and you want to pick it back up, you're doing a deadlift to pick it up. So you want to make sure you can move in these patterns, and helping people understand that they need to be able to move in that way can also help them build confidence and not be quite as scared of doing it. If they can see, oh, I actually do this in my everyday life. You're right. I do need to learn how to do it without fear and with this confidence.
It's interesting because I think I've seen more clients have an acute back injury from like picking up a towel or a set of keys off the floor than I've seen like trying to PR their one arm dead, right?
Yeah, I always see people, they come in. The most recent one I had was he was tying up his shoelace and his back went out. And yeah, you know, like we worked together, we got him moving again.
I'm not laughing at him.
3 weeks, he was fine.
I can like see that happening.
That's so simple.
Yeah.
Like I was tying my shoelace and my back went.
Or I've sneezed and my back's gone, you know, like it's like all those injuries your parents used to complain about as when you were younger. Is it true too that patients who go and get imaging tend to report lower like responding success coming back from injury than patients who avoid getting imaging done? Is that true?
I'm not sure on the exact numbers, but imaging is not always necessary. In fact, I don't really refer for imaging unless I think there's a fracture or unless someone's not getting better. Pretty much, if you get an image of someone's lower back, you're probably going to find something on most people, regardless of whether they have pain or not. I think the statistics, something like 70% of people, you're going to find maybe like some kind of abnormality on their scan, even if they don't have pain. So, and besides, even if you get a scan, you're probably going to treat them the same anyway. If they're getting better week to week, you just don't really need it. It doesn't, just because you know what's wrong or if there's something there, it doesn't mean it's going to stop you from moving or stop you from doing things. But then on the flip side of that, sometimes people do like having that peace of mind. I typically don't refer for scans unless I think it's really necessary. There's certain criteria as well that will suggest if you need a scan or not, especially for things like whiplash and neck pain. But again, I don't think that you get good results just because you have a scan. So yeah.
So the general theory is like, if something hurts when you do it, maybe stop doing that specific movement, but you can still work out ways to kind of work around that movement, right? Yeah.
Correct. Yes, you can. Yeah.
Okay.
I think at the time, if it's an acute injury, if say, for example, we're using the deadlift example at the gym, if you're deadlifting at the gym and you feel your back go, it's probably a good idea not to do that weight at the gym right now if you've just felt your back go. But it might be a really good idea to get on the bike and do a little bit of cycling or walk on the treadmill. Or maybe you want to get the broomstick and mimic that movement pattern with the deadlift with a broomstick instead of just stopping completely and then going and sitting on the couch and doing nothing for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Seeing someone early is also a really good idea because then they can help you with that graded progression back into exercise and movement. Look, it's going to probably hurt whether you do your back at the gym or whether you do it tying up your shoelaces. It's going to hurt anyway for the first few days because if there's inflammation involved, it's just going to suck. It's going to be really painful. You're going to feel like lots of things you don't want to do, but working around the pain and finding things you can do, such as usually a really gentle walk is quite good. Getting in the pool is nice because it offloads your joints. You can do body weight movements if they're feeling okay. So finding things you can do is really important, and then getting back to the things you want to do sooner with graded progression is going to help you get back to where you were at.
Yeah. Speaking of inflammation, and here's like another, is this true? Is that true? I feel like I'm just like pulling out random examples. Should you, like, if you do feel like you've acutely hurt yourself and whatever else, like Kat will never let me take like anti-inflams for the first like 36 to 48 hours after, like, yeah, damn it.
Good job, Kat. Kat is right. You heard it here.
Don't tell her. And I guess like the theory behind that would be like, you are just delaying the inevitable, right? By you need to inflame, like, because I think like the big theory of the time used to be like rice, like as soon as you hurt yourself, like slam the ice on it. And I guess unless you're at a professional level where you're going to go straight from like hurting yourself into see doctors and surgeons, particularly have whatever corrected, like you want to slow the inflammation to that point. But for just like general like whatever, if that's not the case, you just kind of have to let it inflame. Yeah.
Yeah. So inflammation is a natural process in the body, and inflammation is there for a reason. So the really great thing about inflammation, although it hurts and it sucks, and if you've done your ankle, for example, people often will roll their ankle and then their ankle's going to swell up really big. Straight away, what they usually do is they put ice on it, or they take anti-inflammatories, they wrap a bandage on it, and they try not to move it too much. That is kind of old information now. That's that Rice principle or RICER principle. Rice is really good for first aid. If you've lost a finger somehow, or you've got your arm cut off, yes, you can rice those things. You can rest it, ice it, compress it, elevate it. That's what it was initially used for, okay? It was for amputees, people who had lost limbs. So rice is really good in that initial first aid. If you've like lost a limb or broken a bone, something like that, that's fine. If we're talking about soft tissue injuries where you've rolled your ankle, or you've strained a muscle, pulled a muscle, you've done a bit of a sprain or a strain, so that's muscle or ligament, this is where we would avoid anti-inflammatories. You would avoid ice. Elevation's okay and compression is okay. But we've now got this new kind of like acronym, if you want to call it an acronym, that's come out in the last couple of years called Peace and Love. So it's a really great way to sort of look at dealing with musculoskeletal injuries if they've just happened, because we don't want to interrupt the inflammatory process. So inflammation, I sort of started saying it was there for a reason. The reason is because it brings all these nutrients to the area. So it starts to kind of heal that area while it's inflamed. So that's why it gets all puffy, because it's bringing all these chemicals into the area. Also, those chemicals are then going to go to the brain and come back to the brain and say, hey, brain, something's injured. We need to fix it. Let's do something about this. So then your brain knows, okay, we need to send those fixing chemicals there to try and fix that joint. The other thing too is that when it swells up, it causes pain, and then you don't want to move the joint, which is kind of a good thing if you think about it. If you don't want to move it initially, it stops you from doing things that you would otherwise keep doing. So like if you've sprained your ankle, we'll use the ankle example because I'm sure most people can relate to it. If you've sprained your ankle and then you ice it and use anti-inflammatories, you're not going to have as much inflammation. So the next day you're like, I feel awesome. I can go for a run on this ankle. Probably not a good idea. So if you let that inflammation process happen, yes, it's probably still going to be puffy after 24 hours, but it means you're not going to go for a run on it and do something really stupid. But in the long term, you're going to have faster recovery. You are allowed to start moving that joint, but just not in the first 24 to 48 hours. You want to allow that inflammation to happen. That is a good thing, okay? So don't interrupt the inflammation process, but then we do want early movement, so as early as we can. So once the inflammation starts to settle down and you can weight bear without that too much pain, too much discomfort, then you're allowed to do gentle exercise. So cardio exercise is really good. For example, when I say cardio, I mean like getting on the bike, I mean going for a walk. That is also considered cardio exercise. It's not just running. So you can definitely get on the bike, get some movement in there, even just do some gentle like foot movements up and down. So you are allowed to load that area as early as you can. And then once the inflammation's gone down, which is usually after about 7 to 10 days. So initially inflammation is the worst in the first 3 to 4, then it will start to improve. At 7 to 10 days, you can probably start loading it up again. So that's when we'd start to build muscle, proprioception exercises, balance exercises. Just make sure that's not going to re-injure. By 3 weeks, you should be pretty good if you've had a pretty low grade strain or sprain. But yeah, early movement's really important. don't interrupt the inflammation process. That is your take-home points from that one.
So we've covered shoulders, we've covered lower back, and while we're on ankles, do you find ankles in particular tend to be something that will go from like a sprain or whatever, get back to about 85% like quite quickly, but then like sometimes that last 5, 10, 15% just seems to like never return, or almost be like 6, 8, 12 months down the track to is that just because people are lazy with rehab, or is there something specifically with ankles that they just like are tough to, I guess it's harder to stay off them, right? Because you walk everywhere.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. With ankles, especially with ankle sprains, they can progress very easily to chronic ankle instability. So the chance of re-injury on an ankle sprain is something like 80%. Like, it's really high. Don't quote me on that figure, but the chance is really, really high on ankle re-injury. Yeah. But yeah, the chance of...
Sorry.
It's really high. So if you've done your ankle before, it's pretty likely you're going to do it again. And you do need to really put a lot of energy into your rehab and continue it even when you feel good, so that you don't have that chronic ankle instability. So it is something that, yes, you have to put a lot of effort into as a person, as a patient, but also that you are likely to re-injure it just because of the nature. Like you said, we're using our feet all the time. If you're walking on uneven surfaces, maybe your footwear isn't that good. It's going to be very easy to re-injure. And sometimes I think people get back into sport and play a bit too soon after doing their ankle, and maybe they haven't done enough rehab or enough drills to prepare them for that sport. So if you're doing something directional change, maybe they haven't done enough directional change before they got back into sport. Yeah. So it's really important to have a good rehab plan for ankles, definitely. Follow it through and continue it even when you're feeling good. Load is also really important. People sometimes don't add enough load onto the ankle and the area, or do drills that are specific into what they need their ankle to do. So yeah, if you're playing like a field sport or a running sport, footy, soccer, netball, basketball, those kind of sports, you do have to train that change of direction, which I think sometimes people forget.
So your rehab should be like your antibiotics. Just because you're feeling better doesn't mean you like stop the course until it's finished.
Yes. I really like that. Yeah, definitely. Yep. And things like ankle straps,
or even like things like knee sleeves and that sort of stuff, like, are they becoming more of a crutch than they are? Like, if you're never progressing to like go for a run without having to like strap your ankles or else, would that be an indication that you have more work to do to get that back? Like, surely the goal would be to progress back to no brace or like crutch, right?
Yeah, short answer, yes. I would say that you probably do need to do a little bit more work. In saying that, sometimes people do have quite a lot of damage in their ankle, and then they don't feel any pain. So they do have a lot of instability. Sometimes the ligaments aren't actually fully intact. So I know of someone who recently did an ankle sprain and didn't feel any pain whatsoever, but he'd ruptured 2 ligaments. So he actually doesn't have that support in his ankle, and he does need to strap his ankles. So he can do lots and lots of like muscular training and balance training and things like that. But at the end of the day, if you don't have that support from your ligaments because you've maybe torn them, well, like you're not going to have it. So sometimes surgery is the answer, but I would avoid surgery unless it's really, really necessary and you cannot perform your daily activities and functions. Definitely, like, some people might need to keep strapping or using braces. And like, I'm fine with that. If you can get through your daily activities and you can avoid surgery and you're happy, like, go for it, because it's a really good tool to, like I said, avoid surgery if it's not necessary. Sometimes it's necessary, but a lot of the time it's not. Just kind of depends on the person. Yeah.
I just want to circle back to inflammation quickly. So obviously, like, the right circumstances, acute injury and stuff like that, it's definitely a good thing. But in general, when it's not super required, like, obviously you want to keep inflammation to its lowest. How much do you buy into ice baths, like hot saunas, like all that sort of stuff? Are you in the camp where like, yeah, you should be going down to the beach and jumping in and cryotherapy and that sort of stuff? Or are you not quite convinced?
You just cut out on me.
Sorry. Where did you get up to?
I'm really glad you asked that question. No, that's a really good question about recovery strategies. Yeah. So this is something I was actually going to talk about in my talk as well, because there's a lot of research supporting certain things for recovery. Like you said, chronic inflammation is not a good thing. Acute inflammation, if you've done an injury, yes, that's to be expected, but chronic inflammation where it's going on for longer than 3 months, That is not what we want. That's not ideal. Heat can be really effective at reducing pain for people. But in terms of recovery from exercise, then cryotherapy or ice baths have some evidence behind them saying that they can be useful. Also, like a hot cold shower, so changing from hot to cold, can also be beneficial for some people. That's like the cold water cold therapy. So they can, yeah, there's a little bit of evidence. There's a little bit of evidence behind it. But in terms of if we're comparing, so ice baths and cryotherapy and the water, like the water therapy, hot cold, if we're comparing it to things like recovery garments, such as say like the compression garments, they are better. So compression garments are better than the hydro. And also massage is the best one of all of them. So if you're going to get some kind of recovery tool, massage is one of the best tools that you can have if you're thinking about that after training. So some of the footy players who get their massages straight after a game, perfect. It's got a really high research rate. It says the research is saying that's one of the best ways to recover. I'd probably choose that over cryotherapy because ice baths are like not very fun if you've ever sat in an ice bath. I don't think they're very enjoyable. They're not going to hurt. They might help your recovery like 1%. But if we're looking at the other forms, you'd want to probably prioritize nutrition, sleep, water obviously is important, mobility exercises. Massage is really good. Compression garments are really good. Cryo is kind of down on the list, and those water tools are down on the list, even though they might help a little bit.
I thought the most of the deal with like the ice baths and that sort of stuff was more to drop the core temperature so that you can begin to like recover anyway, more than it was like specifically targeted. Does that sound right?
I mean, yeah, it sounds right. I don't know too much about the physiology behind that in terms of like a recovery strategy or to reduce the inflammation. A lot, like I guess where I'm coming from is like if you're comparing them to other things. I don't know about in relation to the core temperature though. Makes sense, I guess.
What you just mentioned with massage, where do you stand on like Theraguns, rollers, lacrosse balls, all that sort of stuff for like post training?
They can be really good tools for people. So Theraguns, I've never used one, but I've heard people, talk about it and rave about it. I guess it's a really easy way to get a massage at home. I don't know the research behind how effective they are. Foam rollers, unfortunately, they do not increase your flexibility long term, but they can help you in the short term to feel a little bit better. They're not going to lengthen your muscles. They're not like the best way to kind of recover, but often they feel really good and people feel really good using a foam roller before or after training. So I'm not against foam rolling, but the research isn't particularly high for it. So it's not going to do a lot physiologically to change the muscles. And definitely it's not going to help your flexibility, but if it makes you feel better, then by all means, like do it. It's not going to hurt. And I definitely use rollers as tools for people. It's better than kind of doing nothing. And if people enjoy it, like go nuts. Spiky balls, again, if you feel better, go for it, do it. Static stretching, not a lot of evidence behind how beneficial it is. So active moving stretching, dynamic stretching is one of the better ways to approach it. Yeah. But I mean, foam rolling is from the research that I've read and seen, and there might be some newer stuff out there now, but this is in the last, year or two, foam rolling tends to be a little bit better than just static stretching for recovery, or anything active recovery is better than just sitting and holding a stretch. So foam rollers, if you want to, sure. It's not going to hurt. Might not be the best, but it's still going to be fine.
Now, anyone that follows you on Instagram will know that like mobility is definitely one of your strengths. And that post you did with like Sonny Webster's like overhead dark walk challenge thing was great. Mobility in general is definitely something that like I've struggled with, particularly overhead mobility, like overhead squatting, like catching a snatch or like in a squat snatch as opposed to like powering everything and writing it down. You just mentioned like a few kind of ways there or a few things that don't necessarily help with like mobility and flexibility, but can you give me some that do? Is like P&F like where it's at? Like, is that kind of the gold standard?
I don't know if PNF is the gold standard. PNF is like a good tool. It's going to lengthen the muscle fibers. But if we're looking at a sport like CrossFit or Olympic weightlifting, where you need good shoulder mobility overhead, PNF isn't really going to be applicable because you need to have that mobility under load. So the best thing that I find is really beneficial for people to improve their mobility in those particular sports is load up the position, not like, super crazy to the point where their technique fails, but add load into the mobility movements because it's going to help you to gain that position better or find that position better. So a lot of people get, they get a little carried away with just like doing these kind of like cool stretches or whatever. But yeah, definitely adding load to some mobility exercises is going to be really helpful. Okay. That's what I would say.
Would that be just like an empty barbell trying to overhead squat and then just holding the bottom of the squat for a little while to get comfortable in that position and then slowly adding load there, or?
Yeah, I mean, with the barbell, that's definitely a really great way to do it. But the only problem with that is that it's a fixed bar overhead. So then you're not going to get that variation of movement through your shoulder. So if you did a single arm hold instead, even just standing on the spot, holding like one arm overhead, and then you can hold like a 1 kilo weight to start and then a 2 kilo weight. And you can do like little circles, for example, like that. That's going to start to improve the mobility overhead. And then eventually you can load it up with like a kettlebell. So single arm kettlebell or 2 kettlebells if you want to do both arms. So then your weight is disconnected and you have to work a little bit harder in that position to hold the weight. And it might be that your arm goes back over your head a little bit more than when it would with a barbell, but that's because it's a free weight. It's more of an open chain movement. Whereas with the barbell, it's a bit more locked in, it's a bit more closed. So you don't have as much room to move and as much kind of freedom to move. And we want to encourage that freedom to move. So if you're using something more free weight, like a kettlebell or just a weight plate, that's going to help you with that freedom to move a bit better. And it should translate into a barbell movement. Also looking at your thoracic mobility is going to be really important. So moving your shoulders around your thoracic joint is going to be really, thing to look at. And there's a lot of different ways. Again, I give people more activation stuff. You can do it standing, you can do it on your stomach, prone, you can use a roller to assist you. So there's a lot of different ways. But again, it's quite person specific, but they're the main things that I look at for overhead athletes looking to improve their mobility is load up their overhead position, find where they're not stable and try and improve that stability and improve that mobility with weight and slowly progress the weight up. And then also look at their thoracic mobility and how can we move that better? It might be that you're just doing like a little back extension movement with a roller. So there's a lot of different ways.
So your thoracic mobility would be why you're losing the bar forward at the bottom of the squat. Would that be right?
It can be. Yeah, it can be.
And would you be doing those? That's just like making little notes. Would you be doing that activation work as like part of like a dynamic warm up before doing like some Olympic lifting, or are you putting yourself more at risk by becoming like too mobile before starting to go into like a loaded position if you do it before as opposed to after? Like, what's the general diagnosis?
That's a really good point. You could definitely become too mobile for some people going into weightlifting because we do need some degree of tension when we're going overhead to catch a heavy weight overhead. So you don't want to be too loose through your muscles, which is why static stretching is not a good idea. So that's why dynamic would be okay. Like dynamic stretching, you're lengthening the muscles, but you're getting that kind of contraction at the same time. Whereas if you're just doing a static stretch, you're holding and you're just lengthening and you don't have any of the contraction. It's just nice and loose. I mean, it's not floppy, but it's a bit too loose. So in terms of adding load, I don't see that it would be a problem to do it before training and before lifting if you're going to add load into your warm up. In fact, I encourage people to do I give them a certain exercise and I say, do this either before training or after training, whichever one you're going to make time for. Yeah. Before or after, whatever. I don't care. Just do it.
Perfect. There you go. Well, I expect after this conversation, my snatch to increase by at least 10% then.
I hope so. Good luck. Let me know how you go.
Awesome, mate. This has been a really good conversation, a really useful conversation. So thanks so much for taking the time. And I guess that's been the thing with lockdown. I feel like the podcast calendar starts to fill up a little bit more. People are a little bit more at home looking for things to do and still connect. And as much as I love my like wife and my daughter and my dog, it is like nice to have conversations with people like external to the household as well. So thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, for sure. It's been great.
And hopefully it won't be too long before we can train again.
Sorry, you just cut out. I didn't hear your last 30 seconds of what you said.
No, I was just saying, hopefully it's not going to be too long till we're back in the gym and back being able to train.
Oh, yeah, I hope so. Hopefully in the next week or so, like week and a half, we'll be ready to go.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Steph. I'll see you soon.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye.